It's the Jim and Terry Show with the empty seats still in the Hobbit Hole studio. I'm your host, Terry, and I have some questions about history. History and science. History, science, and culture. History, science, culture, and faith. Specifically, asking the question that I found very interesting from an article published in the New Atlantis Journal. The question posed in the title intrigued me, so I dived right in. Dove right in? Dived? What is the right past tense? I am still diving. How about that? Present continuous. The title, Why the Arabic World Turned Away from Science. Subtitle, On the Lost Golden Age and Rejection of Reason. Wow, what a title. And it got me from there, and it paints a nice little, because my background is history, I loved the approach of the writer. Hillel Ofek is the author. And although this is an older author, it is timeless in terms of its understanding and presentation of history. So I really like that. Did you know there was a golden age of Arabic science? I think that's important to start with. The assertion and claim that really up until the 1300s, really maybe from the beginning, I don't know how long it took for Islam to embrace science and to excel in it, but certainly from the 8th century to the 13th, maybe a little longer, maybe up until the 16th century, Muslim countries, Arab science dominated. It was so far ahead. So it's important to start with that historical point. So what then happened? Well, maybe we should just start by saying, did you know that the terms algebra, algorithm, alchemy, alcohol, alkali, nadir, zenith, coffee, lemon, all of these words, as the article says, derives from Arabic, reflecting Islam's contribution to the West. And by the West, we mean the growth of Western liberal enlightenment and I'm not going to say post-Christian, but let's just say liberal political thinking where humanism and human rights are being promoted in the political sphere and less of a grip of Christianity as the be-all and end-all of values, of laws, of jurisprudence, and maybe some fundamental shifts happening because of a philosophical emergence, which we call the Enlightenment in Europe. Anyway, where am I going with all this? Well, starting with the fact that Arab countries led the scientific world for so long. And then what happened? Why did the Arabic world turn away from science? Which begs the question, really, is Islam stuck in the 8th century where it was fostered and nurtured and grew, and often expansion through the end of a sword? Well, let's start by taking a look at just how prevalent science is, the Muslim science today. And I will quote from this paragraph of the article. The spirit of science in the Muslim world is as dry as the desert. Pakistani physicist Pervez Amirali Hudhoy laid out in a grim statistic in a 2007 Physics Today article, where he says, quote, Muslim countries have 9 scientists, engineers, and technicians per 1,000 people, compared with a global average of 41. In Arabic nations, there are approximately 1,800 universities, but only 312 of those universities have scholars who have published journal articles, peer-reviewed journal articles. And of the 50 most published of these universities, 26 of these higher institutions are in Turkey, 9 are in Iran, 3 each in Malaysia, Egypt, Pakistan. Pakistan and Uganda actually have 2. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, Kuwait, Jordan, and Azerbaijan each have 1. Wow, that is quite a shortfall of science in the Arabic world. There are roughly 1.6 billion Muslims in the world, but only 2 scientists from Muslim countries have won Nobel prizes in science. One in 1979 for physics and the other for chemistry in 1999. 46 Muslim countries combined to contribute just 1% of the world's scientific published literature. Spain and India each contribute more to the world's scientific literature than all those Arabic countries taken together. In fact, although Spain is hardly an intellectual superpower, Spain translates more books in a single year than the entire Arab world has for the past 1,000 years. And I'd like to see how that was calculated, but that's an interesting statistic if it is in fact true. And this quote sums it all up, I guess. Though there are talented scientists of Muslim origin working productively in the West, says Nobel laureate physicist Steven Weinberg, for 40 years I have not seen a single paper by a physicist or astronomer working in a Muslim country that was worth reading. Whoa. Okay, so I'd need to examine that a little bit more. Who is the Nobel laureate Steven Weinberg, and why is he saying that? Well, we're looking at comparative metrics. And comparison gives you a reference point as to how great or how little in terms of quantity or quality science is present in Arabic countries. So that's kind of an interesting. There are all kinds of ways of measuring this, and the study goes on to talk about the UN Statistics 2003 Arab Human Development Report. Between 1980 and 2000, Korea granted 16,328 patents, while 9 Arab countries, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, granted a total of 370, and many of those patents were registered by foreigners. A study in 1989 found in 1 year that the United States had published 10,481 scientific papers that were frequently cited, while the entire Arab world published 4. And you got that number? This was 1989, so we're talking about 30 years ago, 40 years ago. We are seeing a problem, and the problem is the growing distance between Arabic countries in science and the West in science. And it's important to ask the question, why? When there was something called the golden age of Islamic science, and that lasted up until, as I said, about the 16th, until maybe the Enlightenment and the embrace of the scientific method in Europe. And then all of a sudden, it is the West that is dominating. And the question is why? And I wonder whether it is the teachings, the Quran, as much as, and I see this all the time in current social media, Islamic defenders, apologists for Islam, trying to claim that it is a scientific book, that it comports with science today. These things are really not scientific at all. The claims that a book written in the 7th century is scientific is like saying the book of Genesis contains all you need to know about the origins of the universe and cosmology and human growth and development. And really, you got to ask a question. Seriously, you cannot assert these things with no evidence. All right, so some damning statistics, and that's important to consider. So given that Arabic science was the most advanced in the world up until, maybe the scientific revolution, you can ask what went wrong. And why is it that modern science, as we know it, the scientific method, did not arise from either Baghdad or Cairo or Cordoba? But that's another question. What we really want to look at is what happened to stultify, to stop it. Is it that other people were so much smarter, so much whatever? No, it's not. It has nothing to do with intelligence. It has everything to do with dogma. And that gets me, here's a plug for the book still coming. So this is going to figure in what I'm looking at. And it's not just Islam that stultified. Ancient China, fireworks, we know gunpowder. Yeah, Indian civilizations, most advanced, more advanced than the West, did not produce the scientific revolution. That came from the Enlightenment in Europe. So, yeah, there's a lot to explore and poke around. There are two reasons, this is a quote from the article, why it makes sense to refer to the science activity of the Golden Age as Arabic. And again, kudos to these countries, kudos to Islam. First, it was the most philosophical and scientific work at the time, eventually translated into the Arabic language, which became the language of scholars in the region. Regardless of ethnicity or religious background, it was all these works were published in Arabic, so that became the scientific language of the day. The alternatives, the Middle Eastern science or Islamic science, are less accurate. So again, we will use the word Arabic science, not Islamic science. So what about the Golden Age? What happened? Well, the Golden Age faded. And it's interesting to understand some of the reasons. Well, part of it is simply civilizations collapse. And as the Greeks were the scientific innovators and Greek became the language of science and math in the days of Alexander the Great, so Islam became under Muhammad and the expansion of Islam into Spain, across all of North Africa and the Middle East. That was the heyday, but things changed. And I'm just going to read from the article again. Quote, to understand the anti-rationalist movement that has become Islam, we again turn our gaze to the time of Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun. Al-Ma'mun picked up the pro-science torch lit by the second Caliph al-Mansur and ran with it. He responded to a crisis of legitimacy by attempting to undermine the traditionalists, the religious scholars, the Quranic scholars, while actively sponsoring a doctrine called Mu'tazilism. Forgive me for my mispronunciation. It was deeply influenced by Greek rationalism, particularly Aristotelianism. So what do we find here? That we find the Islamic or Arabic science influenced by the Greeks. But like anything that changes, there's a reaction. And the backlash took place, and by 885, so within half a century, it became a crime to copy books of philosophy. The beginning of the de-Hellenization of Arabic high culture was underway, and by the 12th and 13th century, the influence of Greek philosophy was completely pushed out. And so we have the decline of the golden period of Arabic science. And what do we have now? Is it anti-science? Is it anti-West? What is it that's going on now? Stay tuned.